We are back. You are here. Thank you for joining me in our study, Bible Studies for Life, in the series After God's Own Heart, a fresh look at the Ten Commandments. And we're looking at the Ten Commandments as given to us in Exodus chapter 20, as given originally to Moses, and then we are looking at them in relation to David's life. And so this gives us an interesting perspective on what it means to actually keep the commandments. I mentioned last week in my lesson how a lot of times you'll hear of people doing drives to build a monument to the Ten Commandments or to post them in some public place. And this is an opportunity for us to see what they actually look like in person and how we can replicate that in our life. So today we're going to be in Exodus 20 and Psalm 145. Those are our two scripture passages today. And we're going to look at two commandments, and then we're going to look at David's life and some of the things that David had to say that exemplified how he committed himself to keeping these commandments. And, you know, Scripture is a story. It's written about people. And so it's not an instruction manual, even though there's plenty of instructions in there. So you don't see David write, well, on day X, I kept the Sabbath. Rather, he talks about his attitude towards God and his behavior towards God that allows us to see that he did keep the Sabbath, okay? And so these are the things, the same truths that are going to apply in our lives as we seek to honor God and as we seek to worship him. So, here we go. Exodus 20, we're going to read verses 7 through 11. Do not misuse the name of the Lord your God, because the Lord will not leave anyone unpunished who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. You are to labor 6 days and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You must not do any work. You, your son or daughter, your male or female servant, your livestock, or the resident alien who is within your city gates. For the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and everything in them in 6 days. Then he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and declared it holy. First, let's briefly remind ourselves of these two commandments. The first one is that we should not take God's name in vain. The second one is that we should keep the Sabbath holy. Now, you and I have heard much about what it means to take God's name in vain. And we've usually heard it in the context of someone who is cursing or someone who is using foul language in reference to God. And while that can certainly be the case, when God told the Israelites this through Moses, he had a very specific time frame and very specific behaviors that they would have seen around them that would have allowed them to model how it meant to not take the Lord's name in vain. The first would be the fact that the pagan countries around them made their own gods. And because you make your own God, then you can tell that God, small g, what to do. You can tell that God to curse someone. You can tell that God to not give to others and only to give to you and those sorts of things. And so when the implication was that we not take the name of the Lord our God in vain, was that the Israelites understood that God was not their personal puppet. They couldn't simply invoke God's name to get something that they wanted. And to give you some examples of how that kind of works in today's world, we'll say some things sometimes in very haphazard fashion, like, well, it might not be the smart thing to do, but God's got me. You know, a lot of times I hear people reference the man upstairs as if there's some being somewhere floating around who's just going to bless them because they've worked hard, and that's usually how that's referenced to. Another way we can say God's told me, take God's name in vain, is to say God told me something, or to make an observation about God that is simply not true. In fact, we have preachers constantly, especially once they reach a certain notoriety status of notoriety, that they like to say that someone cannot be a follower of God unless they XXX. And I'm not talking about faith and trust in Jesus. I'm talking about whether they vote a certain way, whether they cut their hair a certain way, whether they wear clothes of a certain style or whatever. And to that end, that is taking God's name in vain, because that is assigning a value to God and signing a response that God will give based on this own person's observation and not based on who God is. The second one is also a very large one, and it's one that you and I need to take some time to remind ourselves of the context. and that is dealing with the Sabbath. Now, we understand that the Sabbath for the Jews was Saturday. It was the seventh day of the week. And we also understand and can read very clearly what was said here, that there's not supposed to be any work done. And by the way, God is so specific in this, He wants them to know nobody can do work. He says their children, their livestock, or even the resident alien. And the idea there is someone who is a non-Jew who would potentially work for them. And so God draws a hard line here and says, hey, nobody works. Shut this thing down. All right? And why? Let's remind ourselves of what the Sabbath was for the Jews. First of all, we said, well, it was the seventh day of the week. It was, except for the Sabbath actually predates the Ten Commandments. In fact, you could argue that all of the Ten Commandments predate the Ten Commandments, but the Sabbath goes all the way back to the very beginning of creation when God worked for 6 days, and on the seventh day He looked back and said it's good. So the first thing we know about the Sabbath is the Sabbath is not just about fatigue. And that's the reality there for all of us that we need to be reminded of, because you and I like to think, well, the Sabbath is just so I can rest. I'm so tired. I've worked all day long. Can I promise you something? Can I tell you something? God was not tired when He rested the first time. God was done. He was complete. And by the way, if you go back and you study the Israelite Sabbath requirements, it was just not about the seventh day. It was about the seventh week. It was about the seventh year. It was about the 49th year. It was about all of these things, a system that God had put into place. And the reason for it was to create dependence upon God. For example, they were to trust God. In our society today, we think that we cannot stop. We constantly have something with us to keep us connected, to keep us occupied. We don't trust the work that we've done. We're always looking for something else to do. It was good. God said it was good. In our society, if we're not careful, we never cease from profiting. Pandemic has made different things for those of us who are Bible teachers and pastors and youth pastors. No longer can we look out there and count heads. But you know what we count? We count views. Hey, buddy. We count visits, site visits. We count clicks. We count them. Why? Because there's this dependency in us, or this idea in us, that we know what it means to be successful. And yet God models something in creation that David, later on, we're going to see in just a minute, models himself. And that is a dependence that God is going to do His work after our work has been done. And by the way, that's not an idea of just, I've done all I can, I'm quitting. It's, I've done as best I can, and now it's time to trust and depend and believe that God is faithful. And by the way, you can go into Ezekiel chapter 20, verse 12, and if you read all the Old Testament prophets, one of their greatest condemnations is that they violated the Sabbaths. And it's not the seventh day that they normally violated. They were violating the year of Jubilee. And if you don't remember what the year of Jubilee was, let me help you out here. They forgave everyone who owed them money. They released their servants from their bondage to them. I mean, this is stuff that literally would blow our mind if we were to consider it. Now, students, you think about this. You build a business, and on the 50th year, you stop. You stop. You don't profit for an entire year. You give away everything that you have. This is so anti our society, or even our own religious function. In fact, it was so anti the religious function that when Jesus came to the earth, the Pharisees criticized Him for healing men on the Sabbath. And Jesus was like, you guys don't even understand what this is about. You think it's about sitting at home and not doing anything. It's way more than that. It's about doing what is good and what is right and trusting in God. By the way, let me give you an observation. What is one of the ways that we keep the Sabbath? And we're going to use football as an example. And no, not because football's played on Sunday, because, by the way, Sunday is not the new Sabbath. And by the way, there's a lot of people that say, well, our family doesn't go out to eat on Sunday, or we don't do this on Sunday, or we don't do that on Sunday. Great. Use those things to recognize who God is and to trust in Him. It is a way of celebrating the Sabbath. But let's use football as an example. This past Friday night, Ware County High School had their first home football game of the year. When I got into my vehicle to head to the game, the thermometer in my truck said it was 100 degrees outside. 6 p.m. 100 degrees outside. Now, it probably wasn't exactly 100, but it was over 95. It was high. It was hot. And you know what I did? Cranked up that truck and headed to the ball game. You know what I did when I got there? Well, actually, I'd already done this. I paid for my tickets. I walked up to a gate. I handed my tickets to the lady at the gate. In the past, they've searched our bags. They've wanded me with the stuff, the things that they're doing to try to ensure we have a safe place to be. They didn't do it this past week, but they have done it in the past. And every time they've done it in the past, I've scarecrowed for them. No problem. I'm going to watch a football game. I got into the football game on Friday, 45 minutes before kickoff. I like football. I like high school football. My family and I have practically always done it this way. I sat there. I watched the players warm up. I watched the band march in. I listened to the horrible music. I don't know why we can't do a better job at that, but anyways, I'm not a DJ, but I could pick better songs. I mean, some of them are good. You always got Eminem's One Shot. But the reality of it is, I sat there 45 minutes before the ref even blew his whistle for the first time. It is said that the average football game contains 17 minutes of playing time. I was there for 3 hours and 45 minutes. And because it was a running clock, it was only that long. Now, 3 hours, not the 45 minutes, just 3 hours. And that was including pregame. So let me ask you something. Isn't that honoring football? Isn't that honoring the players? Isn't that honoring the band? Isn't that honoring our community? Isn't that honoring the camaraderie? Isn't that? Yes, yes, and yes, and yes. So, that is what the Sabbath is supposed to look like. And now please hear me. I am not talking about going to church and not complaining that the preacher went long. That may be a part of it. What I am simply saying is this. There has to be times in our life where we shut down everything to honor God. And no complaints. I've worked as hard as I can this week. I'm going to stop. My house is in the position it's in. I'm going to stop. My projects are in the position they're in. I'm going to stop. I'm going to reflect on who God is. I'm going to reflect on His faithfulness. We're going to look at how David did that in just a minute. And I am going to stop what I am doing and do that. How often do you and I do that? Or how often are we constantly churning something else in the background while we are doing it? It's hard to do. That's why we're commanded to do it. So let's look at David. In Psalm 145, we're going to look at verses 1 through 3, and then we're going to look at verses 4 through 7. And we're going to be a little quick on the end here as we kind of wrap this thing up. David says this, I exalt you, my God the King, and bless your name forever and ever. I will bless you every day. I will praise your name forever and ever. The Lord is great and is highly praised. His greatness is unsearchable. When we read that, the tendency is to say, I do that. When I sing my songs and when I sing in church, I'm participating in praising God. And you are. And I am when we do those things. But this is different. This is more. And the reason this is more is David is writing this out. And I just challenge you, when is the last time that you sat down and put effort and thought into producing something that shows your reflection on God's goodness? And just as a challenge, we've been asking many of you to write devotions, and so many of y'all have participated, and it's just been a great encouragement to me. But we've been asking our church members to participate if they're able and if they want to. And it's awesome to see these people write down and overflow just what David did. That's Sabbath. That's honoring God. That's taking and saying, in my circumstances, I have enough time. I have enough place. I can do this. I don't have to check the score. I don't have to watch that ball game. I don't have to go complete that project. Let me stop and let me reflect on the goodness of God. So the first thing we see in verse 1 and verse 3, I think we see David keeping the Sabbath. The first way is in verse 1 where it's a reflection. I exalt you, my God, and bless your name forever and ever. He's looking back on what God has done. It's a reflection. How often do you and I do those things and reflect on what God has done in our week, in our month, in our years, and in our lives, or maybe even in our generational lives as we look back through our generations? One of the things I've not given a lot of thought to, but it's so absolutely true. I've actually written on a little bit and some in reflection of my aunts and uncles. But my father was raised without a father or a mother after the age of 5. And he became a pastor, not because of him, but because of God's faithfulness through a grandmother, through aunts, through uncles, through all of these people that God placed in his life. And it's a tremendous thing for me to sit back and think about where my family is now, in part because of the faithfulness of God through these other people throughout generations, people, many of them whom I've never met. And then in verse 3 he talks about trust. The Lord is great and is highly praised. His greatness is unsearchable. And so David is saying, my life is trusting in who God is. And the reality of it is this. David is saying that he will bless God every day, not just on the good days. Not just on the days when he gets the phone call that he wants, or he gets the test score he wants, or in you guys and girls' case, he gets picked to be on the team, or he makes the cut, or whatever it is that we're trying to get or attain. David says, I bless the Lord forever and ever. I will exalt and bless your name forever and ever. Sabbath is not just doing all you can and then resting. It is resting in what you do. I'm going to say that again. Now, guys and girls, hear me out real quick. Sabbath is not just doing all you can and then resting. It is resting in what you do, which means when we do well, and we do to honor and glorify God. And we find that in multiple other places in Scripture of how we should live our daily lives. The second thing is, in verse 2, I think he talks about how we should keep the Lord's name. David says, I exalt the name of God. In other words, I don't bring God down to my level. I look up to where God is. And this is he says, I will bless your name forever and ever. And this is a reminder of who we are in God. And there's so many times I want to bring God down to my level and say, here, God, here's my situation. Now I want you to fix it this way. And normally I find that doesn't happen. God doesn't necessarily work in the way I envision. And it's a reminder that God is greater than you and I, okay? And more, we can't even fathom the way he works. So let's look at verses 4 through 7 as we wrap this up and as we consider how David does and lives in relation to these commandments. Verse 4 says this, one generation will declare your works to the next, and I will proclaim your mighty acts. I will speak of your splendor and glorious majesty and your wondrous works. They will proclaim the power of your awe-inspiring acts, and I will declare your greatness. They will give a testimony of your great goodness, and will joyfully sing of your righteousness. Let's go back and remind ourselves of some things. And then we're going to look at these verbs. And I'm going to leave you just kind of to think about these verbs that are in these 4 verses. When David told the story of Goliath to his children and grandchildren, do you think it kind of went like this? Guys, I was there, my brothers. My brothers. They got problems, big mouths. They're always talking about what they were going to do. And here they are to go off to the war, and I go out there to find them, and they mouth off at me for being there. And here I am. I'm keeping the sheep, and I'm having to feed these guys. They're mad at me because I'm there. And this big dude comes out from the other side and starts hollering, hey, a bunch of punks. Man, my brothers they drop back in the trench. I was like, boys, what's up? Well, it's just a dude. Man, I tell you what, when it was all said and done, that guy was laying on the ground, and I had his sword in my hand, and I chopped his head off. That sounds like some of my stories. In fact, it probably sounds a little bit like some of your stories. I imagine that David's story went a little bit more like this. Kids, there was a time in my life when I was trying to just... Dad told me I needed to go do something. So I took the food and I went to the Army. I really wanted to be there. But I wasn't able to be there. I was the youngest and I had some responsibilities at home. But Dad allowed me to go and take the food. And so I took the food. And while I was there, this guy... I'm telling you, I'd never seen anything like it in my life. This guy comes out from the other side, and man, he just starts spouting off. And I tell you, it was frightening. It was frightening. And in his spouting off, I'm listening to him, and I'm like, man, this guy he's mocking God. He's mocking my God. He's mocking the God of the Israelites. And I started thinking about all the things that God had done for me since I could even remember. And I was thinking about how, I was out with the sheep one time by myself, and a bear came, and man, here I was. Dad had given me this responsibility, and so I attacked the bear. I didn't know what else to do. The bear was going to tear all our sheep up, and so I attacked the bear. And it might have been a little crazy to do, but man, God enabled me to defeat the bear. And then there was another time with the lion, and I was just sitting there watching this guy just run his mouth, and it reminded me of that lion, of how he just roared, and I was supposed to be scared and run, and because I knew God was faithful, I didn't. And man, kids, I was sitting there, I was like, if I can attack a bear and I can attack a lion, I'll take a shot at this guy. Now, which story sounds like mine and yours, and which story sounds like someone who trusts God? You see, remember the statement I made just a minute earlier? Sabbath is not just doing all you can and then resting. It's resting in what you do. Let me give you these verbs. And we're going to kind of hit pause right here. David says, declare, proclaim, speak, proclaim, declare, testimony, and sing. They all have a different implication. But what they really mean is this. The first thing he says is, I'm going to tell everybody what you've done. And that specific story that I just gave in that illustration, I believe David kept in his life. He told his kids, he told his grandkids, he told his friends what God had done in his life. And it sounded like God did it and not like David did it. Unlike some of my stories that sound like Daniel did it and not like God did it. But not only did he do that, not only did he tell people in a personal way, he also declared it, proclaimed it. It's just like, hey, I'm going to write it down. I'm going to put it where everybody can see it. It's interesting in today's social media, the things we proclaim. We're mad at a company because we didn't get good service. We're mad at someone because they share a different viewpoint than us. We're mad at someone because they're trying to enact a law that we don't like, or they're trying not to enact a law we do like, or whatever it is. People know all about our proclamations. David's proclamations were about God's faithfulness. Then he says, I will speak of your splendor. And the reality of this is more of an internal thing. It's more of a reflection thing. He's meditating on what God's done. And so then he goes on, he proclaim and declare back in there again. And then testimony. In other words, he personalizes it. This is how it happened in my life. And then sing. And that's one that you and I can definitely associate with as we think of the times that we've stood in our church buildings, or maybe in our homes, maybe with our headphones on, and maybe in our showers, or whatever it is, and we've sung a song of God's faithfulness and goodness. So as we take these 10 commandments and we look at them in the light of David, may they challenge us to have our dependence upon and in God himself.